If you're perceived to be unprofitable, you're going to end up behind Popup jail. What's up guys, it's Sebastian from AskSebby. Today we're going to talk about the rules that you need to know about before you apply for an American Express card. Some of these are going to be hard rules that have terms and conditions, while other ones are based off learned experience. There also are a ton of variables, so your experience might be different. Even though it might apply to most people, you might be the exception. With that said, big favor before we dive in is to give this a thumbs up, and if you are new here, to consider subscribing. Rule number 1, you need to be 18 years old and a US citizen or a legal resident. You'd be surprised how often this comes up because American cards in the US are substantially more competitive than pretty much everywhere else, even Canada and Australia. Sadly, there's no option for them unless they have an ITIN or an SSN. At the same time, there are a ton of exceptions because being a resident is pretty broad. For example, a lot of Canadians that might mostly live in Canada might have a business in the US that maybe they operate for 1 or 2 weeks a year, so they would have an ITIN, and if they have a mailing address, then technically they can get US cards. Even though you might not be perceived to be a resident, you might be one for tax purposes, and in the case of American Express, that's generally what they're looking at. There also are programs such as Global Transfer that allow you to take your American Express history from another country and bring it to the US. So basically rely on that history in order to get approved for US cards. For example, you're from Germany, you have cards from Germany, American Express cards, you come over here and you want to get American versions. Across the board, American Express tends to be one of the most stringent, so there's a giant list of things they require. A big reason for this is just due to the financial compliance that's required in the US. Same thing with a place like Singapore, pretty gigantic list. In contrast, places like New Zealand and Australia just require your account number, new home address, and new phone number. So technically, if you have Australian family members, then that might be a play. Rule number 2, you generally want a credit score that's 700 and up. This is not technically a rule, but I'm expecting it to come up a lot in the comments. So for me at least, 700 is that threshold where you can get approved for pretty much any American Express card. Also, depending on who you ask, you might see different numbers, so I've seen 670 in the past, and even as low as 650. For me personally, 700 is that number that just helps you de-risk and maximizes your chance of approvals and just less headache. If you don't know how to get your score up, we do have a ton of videos on this, so I'd recommend doing a quick search. If you don't have long-term credit card debt, I think you'd be surprised by how easy it is to increase that score. At the same time, even though 670 or 700 might be fine, you might still get rejected because there are other rules in the background. For example, your utilization might be too high, or maybe you're blacklisted. Main takeaway though, if you have a 700 plus score, you're fine for most cards. Rule number 3, and probably the most important one in my book, is the once in a lifetime rule. This is one of the more argued ones because there are exceptions, but let's look at the terms first. Welcome offers may not be available to applicants who have or have had this card or previous versions of this card. Simple sentence, but there's a lot to unpack. First off, different variations of the card are considered separate products and they're not considered other previous versions. For example, the Platinum and the Platinum for Charles Schwab or Platinum for Morgan Stanley are all considered separate products. Even if you already have the normal Platinum, you can still get those other two and still get the bonus. Even though a lot of the features are exactly the same, technically different products and not prior versions. Have had is also pretty interesting, and let's double click into that. General belief and what we've seen in practice is that if you've had that card at any point, whether a product change, whether you applied and didn't get the bonus, that would still count. With a lot of other issuers, they care more about whether you got the bonus. Here, it's whether you've had it. This is also why you might want to be careful of upgrades and downgrades because you might be locking yourself out of a bonus. Given that intro bonuses are one of the major drivers for a lot of normal people, making a mistake here could easily cost you a few hundred and upwards of a few $1,000s. Main takeaway, don't downgrade to a card unless you've either had it in the past or you don't care about the intro bonus. For example, for the Delta Blue, I don't really care about the intro bonus because it's generally only 10,000 Delta. It's still at least $100 in value, but it's not something like $800, $900, or $1,000. There are exceptions to this rule. Number 1, sometimes you will run into targeted offers that don't have the lifetime language. The main issue for most people is that those tend to be on business cards, which might not be applicable for everyone. Number 2, some people have speculated that lifetime for American Express is only 7 years. Despite all of this, I'm generally pretty hesitant to rely on exceptions because you don't want to put yourself in that position. For this reason, even though I have links for most cards, I try to encourage people to apply when there's elevated offers, or to use tools like Card Match to see if you're targeted for an elevated offer. Also, I'll put a blog post down below walking through Card Match and how you might want to use that. On a side note, if you do want to learn about cards, whether American Express, Chase, or someone else, we do have links on the website, AskSebby.com, and down below in the description box. Make sure the links are competitive, that they make sense for you, but otherwise, it is a huge way to support the channel, so thank you guys in advance. Rule number 4 is the 4-5-6 rule. This one is a bit complicated and there are a ton of nuances. In the past, this was also known as the 5-card rule because historically American Express limits to the 5 credit cards. This means that if you have 5 personal cards and you try to apply for a business card, then you're going to get rejected. If you have 4, you can only get 1 business card. So among your business and personal cards, limited to 5. There also are a ton of different distinctions, so credit cards are different than hybrid cards. Hybrid cards are ones that have a limit but also don't have a limit. The best examples of this are going to be the green, gold, as well as the platinum, the business versions of those cards, and also the plum. Pretty much all the cards that when you log in say that there's no set limit. Technically on the back end there is, but it's more so based off risk and can change pretty often. Everything else would be a credit card, so that would be all the Hilton cards, all the Bonvoy hotel cards, Delta, Amazon, Blue Cash Everyday, Blue Cash Preferred, Everyday, Everyday Preferred, BBP, BBC, and all the other cards I'm not listing, such as Lowe's. Okay, so what does this mean? If you have 5 credit cards, you can still get approved for the gold, platinum, and all those other cards. The gold and the platinum do not affect this 5 card setup. As you might have expected, there also is a bit of variability with this whole rule, so 4, 5, 6, because some people are only limited to 4 cards, while others can go up to 6. If you get a pop-up saying that you're not eligible for a bonus, that is not the 4, 5, 6 rule. That's called the bonus pop-up, and we'll get to that in a second. Also, co-branded cards that are American Express, but you can't log into them through American Express, do not count for this. I believe there's some Navy Fed cards that are American Express, but you log in through Navy Fed. In that case, even though it's American Express, it does not count towards this. Last one that's tangentially related to this is that there was a 10 hybrid card rule in the past, but it seems like it's not the case anymore. If that changes, I'll pin a comment, but there's a lot of people that have been up to 11, 12, 13 cards. And in case you're wondering why anyone would ever do that, generally business owners who have multiple business gold cards. If you're running a lot of Facebook ads and you're maxing out those 4x quarters, then you might as well get additional cards. Rule number 5, 1 in 5. You're typically limited to 1 credit card within a 5-day span. And reminder, this is credit cards and not hybrid cards. Personally, I don't think this is worth micro-optimizing around because if you're a customer of American Express, they generally don't do credit pulls anyways, so there's not really much value. If you do end up applying for 2 cards in one day, the first one will get processed, so if you get approved, great, and the second one will be processed in 5 days. For your own sanity, I would just separate them though, just that way you're not thinking about it and constantly checking. Interestingly, this does not apply to the hybrid cards, so you could apply for the green, gold, and platinum card on the same day and technically get approved for all of them. This might be useful if you have crazy spend coming up, if you're remodeling your deck or something, and you're going to spend the money anyways. At the same time, you might not get approved for all of them though by virtue of the risk, credit score, or your income. Duplicates of cards might sometimes also be an issue and be problematic. Sometimes if you apply too closely, the system will think it's a mistake. In that case, you can either call in to push it through and tell them that it was intentional, or you can just wait 90 days and generally it won't be connected. If you need duplicates of a card, let's say in the case of a business gold, then just call in to push it through. Rule number 6, 2 and 90. Pretty much a continuation of what we just talked about. You're limited to 2 credit cards in 90 days. In this case, 1 in 5 and 2 in 90 go hand in hand. Everything else we just talked about applies, so hybrid cards and credit cards are different, and this applies to credit cards. Rule number 7, and the most ominous one, is going to be pop-up jail. This happens when you apply for a card, and there's a pop-up that comes up telling you that you can still apply, you can still get approved, but without the intro bonus. For people who are new to American Express, one of the most common reasons is that the current spend on your cards through American Express is too low. American Express as an issuer generally makes most of their money from swipe fees, interchange fees, so they want to find higher spenders. You can kind of think of intro bonuses like bait that they're dangling on a fishing rod and they're trying to catch big fish. If they already know that you're a small fish, then they're not really going to dangle that bait. For this reason, I generally recommend other issuers to most new people. You can still get it if you want if you have very high spend, but just be careful because I've seen way too many people get locked out. The number is generally $1,000 to $2,000 in spend per month, but that might be higher or lower depending on where you live, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was some adjustments. There also is some speculation that you might get hit if too much of your spend is for category spend. So for example, if you have the gold card and all of your spend is those 4X categories. To be fair, for this one, I have seen a lot of different things, so I wouldn't really call it a rule, but something to be cognizant of. One of the other things that gets a lot of people is closing your cards too quickly. Per the terms, if you close your card before the 12-month mark of getting a new card, then they have the right to first off get the bonus back, but also blacklist you. So for example, if you get the card February of this year, you would want to wait the full 12 months before canceling or downgrading. Pretty much the same principle for retention offers, you have to wait out the full year once you accept it. Okay, but doesn't that mean that they're forcing me to pay a second annual fee? Not really, because you have 30 days from that annual fee hitting to get a full refund if you cancel the card. And even then, if you decide to, let's say, downgrade 3 months in, so after the first year and then 3 months, then you can actually still get a prorated refund. In effect, you use the card for 3 months and then they kind of just charge you a new fee for the other card. One other thing that's affected people in the past is going to be referrals, and specifically self-referrals, so referring yourself. And it kind of makes sense because when you have a referral, the idea is that you're convincing someone else to sign up. If you're convincing yourself, that doesn't really make sense. They don't want to pay you twice because they'd be paying you for the referral as well as the intro bonus, and that doesn't make sense. In the past, we've seen massive shutdowns around this and people getting blacklisted, so just be careful. Basically, if you're perceived to be unprofitable or you do something to piss them off, then you're going to be out of luck. Again, if you want to learn about American Express cards or pretty much any other cards out there, we have links on the website, AskSebby.com, and down below in the description box. If you made it to this point in the video, then leave a fountain emoji in the comments down below, and I'll try to heart it and also respond. My question for you is, what's been your experience of American Express rules, and how do you think about all of this? Is it kind of an annoying thing that you deal with because they're good cards, or is it something that you avoid? Let me know and everyone else know in the comments down below. Big favor, give us a thumbs up, consider subscribing, but otherwise, hope you guys liked it. See you guys next time.